Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Getting to Third Space is produced by Tenacious Change, a consultancy committed to creating resilient, nonprofit organizations. This podcast is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom, be sure to subscribe to hear about new episodes when they become available. Also, be sure to share this podcast with friends, colleagues, and family. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society.
Good afternoon, Lamar. How you doing?
Hey, Tom. Doing great. And you, how are you doing?
Oh, am I invigorated or what? It was a happy, sad football weekend. That's all I could say. I was sad and happy. I was sad that the Hawkeyes lost. I was thrilled to see the 49ers win, even though I'm not really such a big fan of the 49ers, but there's a couple of guys on that team that I really like to follow. And of course, the Packers won last night. They beat your Kansas City Chiefs. I extend my sincere sympathies.
Somehow, that sarcasm seemed to be dripping onto the microphone.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a pot down here that's collecting all the sarcasm as it drips.
So all I can say is your team played extremely well. Love as a quarterback did a great job. Receivers were open. Kudos to them. However, I got to tell you, I don't know what they paid the refs, but Kansas City should have been in line for a touchdown that was taken away. So it is what it is. Yeah. But that's the game, right?
Well,
and I am happy. Well, go ahead.
Well, my guess is it was the same refs that the night before had been in Indianapolis with Michigan against Iowa. I mean,
no kidding.
Holy cow. So anyway.
You can only blame the refs so far. A team's got to come in. They got to win. Now, I was also had a great weekend, too. I was able to watch, prior to the Iowa football game, the women's Iowa basketball team play.
Oh,
and
yes.
Oh, my gosh. A lot of fun. You and I are going to have a chance with our significant others to watch them play in January, and I think we're going to be in for a treat.
Yeah. I think so too. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I got to see that game too. I think the final score was like 99-2, and I was waiting in the last few seconds to see if they could put it over 100. Right? It was like 99-59 or something like that. It was a pretty sound trouncing.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
but it was fun to watch, and so it was a good weekend all in all. And by the way,
yes,
I don't know. In addition to sports. My wife, Carla, and I had an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of baking over the weekend.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so she's quite famous for her cinnamon rolls.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
She is. And what she does is she has a trial batch that she always does first.
Really?
And then she does the final batch. And so I took a full dozen to my previous office where I used to work this morning and handed those out. They were pretty thrilled to see at least the rolls, and I think that it was nice that we had a chance to catch up. And you and I, Clemency and myself and you and Carla, we have kind of this thing where we share some Christmas goodies, and I've received yours.
Good.
And we have received yours, and we're enjoying them with coffee. But yours is coming with our baking with rolls.
Ooh.
And my favorite, which I'm not sure how many people know what it is, but my favorite is shoe fly pie.
Shoe fly pie. I know what it is, and it is really good. You do a really mean shoe fly pie.
Thank you.
And I think I told you that next year, I am not going to depend on that Texas bakery for my springala. I'm going to make them myself and send them out to you. I was not happy with them this year. I didn't like the flavor. So, and I won't mention the bakery because, of course, there are millions of people that listen to this podcast, and I wouldn't want that to reflect poorly on the business of that bakery. But I was really disappointed in them this year. So
Thank you
gonna,
for sending them. And
well, no problem. Well, my wife says a cookie is a cookie. And so there's no such thing as a bad cookie, right?
oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So we're still enjoying them. I just wish they had been a little bit better. So
Okay, yeah.
it is what it is. But, well, thank you. So we'll look forward to it. We'll look forward
You'll
to the
have
rolls getting here and the shoe fly pie. And
okay. Well, we'll get them. They're in the freezer now, getting ready to be shipped. So
ooh, perfect. Thank you very
Yep.
much. Looking forward to it. Well, hey, so when we met earlier this last week to talk about what we're going to do today, we decided, it's time for us to do a little bit of self-reflection and
that's
self-assessment of where we come from and review, where we started and where we've come. Because we kind of did this, by the seat of our pants, right? We just said, oh, let's do a podcast. So we decided to do a podcast. And generally, here's what we want to talk about. And we just kind of threw ourselves into it. But we also said, I think, and you may have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, or maybe I heard this from you last week. That's it. I heard it from you. That that by about the fifth podcast, we wanted to kind of take a pause and think about where we were. Is that right?
In fact, we thought we may not make it past 5.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what we're doing, right? We're not sure where this is going. So we thought, hey, let's go through December, get about 5 under our belt, and maybe that'll be it. But it's been an interesting ride, and I've been very much appreciative of the responses we're getting. I enjoyed working with you and the kind of topics that we have begun to work through. So yeah, it's been an interesting 5 episodes.
It has been. It has been. So why don't you remind us, if you will, what those 5 episodes were?
In short order, because we don't want to rehash them all.
We don't want to rehash them. Okay. No. Some we just want to forget, actually, but
Nah. You mean like when the camera went down and my head?
Oh yeah. When your head kept going up.
Yeah, right.
As the camera went down.
So we really wanted to talk about this third space concept. And that has been kind of the meat and potatoes of our thinking and the work that we've been doing. And even when we invite people on, we want to focus on creating a space, talking about how to create a space where we can talk about difficult things. We spent a lot of time, I think, in that first episode working on that, focusing on the importance of listening, of learning and understanding, and how we exercise that. We then begin to move into, okay, what are the barriers? What gets us in the way of being able to do the kind of communication and having the civil discourse that we've been talking about? You and I both came up with examples that we've had, both good and bad, right? I'll speak for myself. I know you've done this as well. I've really flubbed up on many occasions trying to set up a good, safe environment for people to be able to share. And you learn from those kinds of things, but we wanted to share what some of those were and be able to kind of give people some tools that they can put into play. We got into then some more personal or interpersonal kinds of barriers, things like anxiety, things like fear, or maybe posturing, or in some ways some intimidation, or having platforms where there are those who come in with, I'm going to tell you what I think. I don't care what you think. It's important that I say what I'm going to say and I'm done, which is not a conversation, right? It's more of a speech. The fact that some people are uncomfortable and learning how to be okay in uncomfortable situations, and even to the point of where we have to be aware of violence. In the work that we've done over the years, like a lot of other people, we've experienced both interpersonal violence and some overt expressions of violence. And that causes a pause as to whether I want to be involved in conversation. We talked about checking your motivation. We talked about focusing on the we instead of the me. making sure this is about us and not just about me as an individual. And being comfortable with the fact that we're not going to be the same. We're not always going to come out in the same spot. Maybe we even are after the same thing, but it's not exactly the same, or our tactics are different. Something you and I chatted about earlier, we may bring up in another episode, and giving yourself an opportunity to bail out when things get a little confusing or uncomfortable, and say it's okay to say, I need to back off and take a break. Finally, our last episode, was with Kansas State Representative Steve Owens, and had the opportunity to talk with him and question him about some difficult conversations he's had, how he prepares for those, and how he's walked through those. So I don't know how long I took. I hope I didn't take too long, but I wanted to give kind of that synopsis of where we've been. It's been an interesting ride for me, very stimulating, and hopefully for those who were listening.
Yeah, that was really a great synopsis, and I was expecting you to go for like 30 minutes. So I think this is really, I think that was really good, but no, it was a great synopsis, Lamar, and it really was. It has been very, very interesting. It's been interesting from the perspective of doing this with you, and then that was a fun interview with Stephen, and all along the way we've had some really good feedback from people, and some suggestions along the way, and so actually a lot of that feedback has been around, well, what you've done well, what you could have done better, and so maybe that's a good way for us to pivot a little bit and pat ourselves on the back on what we think we've done well. Now, I just want to say to people listening in, if you don't agree with these, you are certainly welcome to rebut them. That's perfectly fine. But here's what we think we have done well along the way. One is, very basically, we're doing a whole lot better in figuring out the technology. There's a lot that goes into doing a podcast that I think, in my own naivete, I thought, we record it, we upload it, we're done. And actually, there's editing, and since we added the camera piece and to YouTube, and we're doing this on YouTube as well, the editing has become more complex. There's a lot more steps involved than what I ever imagined, but I think we're getting better at it. For one thing, I'm more in focus.
Yeah, people might have noticed that you were just a little off there for a while.
Well,
focus-wise,
I've been a little off for quite a long time, but yes, focus-wise, I was a little off.
And this is actually the first podcast where I've changed cameras. I was using a webcam for everything up until now, and struggling with backgrounds and backdrops. Being a photographer, I had a number of backdrops, but that just wasn't cutting it, when I looked at, the images afterwards. So it's been, for me, I haven't had to get a lot of new technology. I just needed to figure out how to use what I had in a better way. And I did pick up a teleprompter at your suggestion, which is not a very expensive item I was surprised. And it has really helped that I can actually look forward instead of everyone looking at the top of my head. Which, if you look at that second episode, you saw what I'm missing up at the top of my head. So,
but you have a very nice top of your head. I just want to say it really, and you also, and I hope people notice that your sound has improved too, because you picked up a new mic, and
I did,
and I think all the way around the quality is becoming better in terms of the technology. And like I said, if you disagree with that, please keep it to yourself. And No, let us know. We're understanding. Actually, we've become more at ease too, which is nice. So we can say stupid stuff like that, and tease around with one another and laugh with one another. It is, I go back and I look at the first couple episodes, and we were a little bit more uptight, and really in just 5 episodes we've become a lot more relaxed. And I think part of that is because we've been friends for such a long time, and after a while you begin to feel like you're just sitting there talking to one another.
Well, sometimes that's what we are doing.
Yeah.
And the being more familiar with this process of putting a podcast together and the topic that we're working with that we think is so very important, I think has really helped us kind of be more at ease with how we're going to work with this. We've worked really hard at trying to stay focused on topic. Uh, it's easy, and we do this in our conversations offline, by the way, but it's easy to get off on tangents. We do that on occasion, but we try not. Or we have, we had a guest with Steve Owens. We're going to have more guests, and that person may go off onto tangents that we typically wouldn't. But we want to make sure you all know, and that we stay focused on our message of not only creating a third space in these episodes, but also making sure it's about creating third spaces. It's about communicating in a civil way, with purpose, with direction, and looking for a positive outcome. So that's been an important piece of what we do.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that, we're able to do that as well because we have intentionally not focused on the political debates or religious debates that are just all over the place in American culture right now, and we're doing our very best to stay off of those. We obviously have opinions, we have insights around those, but people can go to many other different podcasts and get those opinions if they want them, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
But for us, we don't need to use this as a platform to kind of push out our own thinking on it. In fact, that would be counterproductive to what we're trying to do by creating a third space where it can come up more organically. Now, at the same time, I think we have to say that we're not afraid to let those come up in the interviews we do with people. And we aren't going to be afraid to kind of follow, the trail if somebody drops some nuggets and we need to ask questions, even hard questions, we can do that. But we're not going to be really intentional about really talking about politics and religious and culture war kinds of issues here in this podcast. And I think we've done pretty well on that too.
Right. And there's a lot that we could talk about, and a lot could be relevant to even our main goal of how to communicate appropriately. But we want to stay with communication because those are the tools that people need, and that groups need, that communities need. And by the way, I'm thinking from where we're going, the conversations we've had, where we're going into next year, we're going to talk more in the area of how to communicate within communities. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is going to be really good. I really do. Well, what could we do better, Lamar? Well, we could probably do a little bit better at dropping episodes on a more regular basis. I think as we learn the process and as we become more comfortable with the process and we get faster at some of the work that needs to be done to get them ready for distribution, we'll be able to do that with greater regularity. And, the other thing I will say, too, is that the more we get feedback from people, the easier it becomes to do this because they give us ideas, they give us suggestions, they give us their thoughts about what we might want to be considering or talking about. Anyway, yeah.
I think I do want to just kind of tag on to that point. Some of the feedback that we've been getting has been incredibly helpful. I just want to let you know it's helped us sit back and make some choices and changes. And I think that, for example, the technical side of things, that input as well has been very, very helpful. In addition to content and maybe even suggestions of who other people might enjoy having on this show.
Yeah. Actually, some of our best technical innovations have come really thanks to your brother. I think one of your brothers, has given us feedback. And, I think at one point he says, Lamar, you look great. Can you do something about the other guy?
We just need to get you back in focus, man. Something we did talk about, and I've, part of it is I don't know all of the ins and outs of how these processes work with different platforms, but and this kind of goes to dropping episodes more. We want to continue to encourage people to take the time to subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on or watching it on, but also set up the notifications so that when we do drop them, when we do publish them, that you're able to know when it happens. We try to get it out to as many people as we can, but that we don't always get to everybody.
Yeah, please do subscribe and sign up for those notifications, and that will help really a whole lot. I think another thing that we probably could do better is that some of our, and for lack of a better term, I would call these our intentional attempts at humor, because hey, we are just naturally funny people, right? And so
Okay.
yeah, okay. Well, for example, we started out in our first episode by introducing stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious, and we dropped that actually, I think, after the second episode, because
Right.
we weren't sure that it left the more fun, positive tone that we really intended with it. And
it did. I didn't feel as comfortable. We didn't feel as comfortable with it as we thought we might.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that there aren't things out there that are stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious, because there are
Absolutely.
a lot of those things out there. But actually, that's where you can go to some of the other podcasts and you can hear about them.
Yeah.
And so we want to try to give people things that are intentionally, more lighthearted, but are kind of fun, and that they can enjoy without kind of like wincing along the way as well.
There might be some winces, though, just an FYI.
Well, there might be a few. Yes,
Okay.
that's true. Yeah, I'm wondering how the one about the sex toys went over with people.
Yeah.
Were anybody wincing at the charity that asked people not to drop off their used and unused sex toys? But
besides me,
yeah. So if you have any thoughts about that, remember the email is Lamar at third place.
Right. So
third space at gmail.com.
So Tom, what are we planning coming up?
Well, we're planning on having more guests, actually, and because we had a really good response to the interview with Stephen Owens, and we're encouraged to reach out to more people in the public sector as a result. You had something more on that, didn't you, Lamar? I'm trying to remember.
Well, yeah, I think that the feedback that I was getting from locally here, because Steve is local in my area, people had an opportunity to see Steve from a different perspective than when he's out in a public setting, because we didn't allow it to really go into a political discourse. That was not the direction we wanted it to go, and it was an opportunity to see a real personal human side of a politician, and kind of what their thoughts and their feelings are, and the things that drive them. So I thought the feedback was pretty positive in that way, and I'd like to see more of that kind of an approach where we're digging beneath what the sound bites are, and into what is it that drives us to communicate the way that we communicate.
Yeah. And then recently, through a colleague up in Canada, I was introduced to a guy by the name of Seth Kaplan, who's at Johns Hopkins University, and he is an expert in the whole area of what's known as fragile states, and that has to do with countries and how fragile they are in terms of their democracy, in terms of their economy, and what the long-term implications are for them. But he's kind of translated some of his work into this book on fragile neighborhoods. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to sit down with Seth and talk with him about the book, and he learned about our podcast, and he said, "Hey, if you ever need somebody to come on, I'd be happy to do it." And so I leapt at that opportunity. And actually, we're going to be interviewing Seth on January 4th, right after the holidays, and we're going to be talking with him about fragile communities, and also in terms of our own focus of this particular program, we're going to be talking with him how setting up civil spaces for conversation within communities really helps to strengthen communities and make them better places for everybody and neighborhoods better places to live for everybody. So looking forward to talking with Seth. We've got some other guests in mind. No commitments yet, so we don't want to name them by any means at this point in time. Of course, if we did, we could, it'd put a little pressure on them, and perhaps, they would definitely say yes, but we won't do that.
So we do have some plans going forward. We definitely hit the 5 episodes that we originally intended to hit, and we're pleasantly surprised. And we appreciate those who are listening, those who are giving us feedback. We encourage people that to share this podcast with others who you think would appreciate this kind of a topic, would find the tools may be useful. And also, if you have suggestions, we are very much open to suggestions for not only topics themselves, but individuals who you might find interesting that we could maybe bring on the show as well. So it's been a fun ride so far, and I'm looking forward to the next set of episodes.
That you just mentioned that, Lamar, it just made me think one of the things we've done a lot better with too are the show notes. And I want to remind people that the show notes are those pieces that we put in. You'll find them typically below the podcast player. If you watch us on YouTube, it's right below the video. And the show notes tell you a little bit about the topic, but also it gives you links in there, links to some of the things that we're discussing, some of the things we're talking about. And also it'll have ways in there for you to contact us. So make sure you check out the show notes, and we keep those updated with each episode so that you know what's going on. Something we were talking about too before we came on, Lamar, was about a rather remarkable story that appeared in the New York Times today about Silverton, Colorado. And because we're going to take a little bit of a break here for the holidays, I would kind of hate to let this one go by without us mentioning it. But Silverton is this town in Colorado that became very, very divided, and they were trying to find a way back to, the circumstances of their division were such that. It had to do with the election of a new mayor that made some decisions that were not popular in the community. And it really did split the community. And people were angry, and they were upset with one another. A town of about 9,000 people. And they kind of clawed their way back. And they did it, which I thought was remarkable, through dialogue, civil dialogue. And so, did you get a chance to look at that story?
I did. I had a chance to listen to the interview of that story, and I was just blown away by the idea that first of all, how quickly division can happen. Well-intentioned individuals say things, do things, or put things out beyond. Far into the public sector where it doesn't really belong because it hasn't been processed or addressed. And then it causes so much more difficulty in trying to process and come to a resolution, because now you have a lot of other factors that are happening. So I was very impressed with how they stood back and then took hold of some of the very tools that we've talked about and put them in play in a community fashion to begin to talk and make decisions to bring that community back together and to understand each other. Listening and understanding was critical in how that community came back together again.
I got to listen to part of the interview live on the channel that was carrying it this morning, and once the story finished, with the author that wrote it in the New York Times. One of the guests on the program then spoke up and said that he recalled working with, I think it was Senator Moynihan many years ago, and that how Senator Moynihan would intentionally go and have meetings with people in communities that did not vote in the direction of his party. That they usually would vote against him when he was running for reelection. And if I have this story right, I believe that one of the things that he talked about there was that sometimes they would start with 100 people in a room and everybody would yell at him. And then they'd get it down to, well, let's try 50, and everybody would yell at him. And then they'd try 25 and everybody would yell at him. And then it was 10 and people were just still angry, and 5. And what they found was that as you began to work with, when you began to meet in groups of 3, the senator and 2 other people, then you could have a conversation. And people oftentimes left those meetings feeling like they had been heard, feeling as if they understood better where the senator was coming from. And, as a result, this guy continued to get reelected, for much of his political career. I'm realizing I may have totally confused that story with 2 stories the guy told. But I think the lesson there is really important, relevant relative to what it is we're trying to do with this podcast. And that is that when you can get into a third space where you can have a civil conversation, you're able to hear differently, you're able to speak differently, you're able to understand in a clearer way what is happening with the folks that you're not necessarily agreeing with, and they are able to experience you in a very similar way as well. So I was very encouraged by that story. That was a great story today.
It was a great story. And what you were talking about with the size of group or the number of people who are together when you're trying to process makes a huge difference. I'm right now in the beginning of stages of assisting and helping a large group begin to walk through some very significant decisions that they're going to be making. And the challenge is, historically, you tend to get together in that large group and someone leads the group in a conversation, a discussion, or even you break into smaller groups, you have a discussion. However, in situations like that, so many people do not have an opportunity or do not take the opportunity for a lot of the barriers that we talked about in episode 3, do not take the opportunity to share or to ask questions or to be able to be part of the conversation. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to make sure all the voices are heard when you start talking about groups and processes or communities and processes. It's a laborious process, but it is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I see by the old clock on the computer that we probably should be winding down here, but in the spirit of all things beautiful and slightly funny, we have a couple of things to wind this holiday podcast up with. And by the way, before we forget, we really want to wish everybody out there a wonderful holiday season. We know there are many traditions that come together at this time of the year. And whatever your tradition is, or if there is no tradition at all, except that you hang out with friends and family, that is a great tradition, right? We just wish you the very best of the holiday season. And
absolutely, we wish you the best.
And get some good sleep too while you're at it. Just get some good sleep.
All
right. So what do you got today, Lamar?
Well, this is on that. This is kind of in the area of maybe wincing a little bit.
Am I going to wince?
You might wince just a tad bit.
Oh my God! Oh no. Okay.
So there is a food chain called Chopt, Chopt eatery. Yep. Okay.
Yep. I used to eat at Chopt. Okay. There was a Chopt right around the corner from my office in downtown DC.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I would go for lunch many times.
And they specialize in specialty salads, right?
Yeah. They chop them.
They chop them. Well, that's part of the story here. So,
oh no.
Yeah, back in April, in New York, Mount Kisco, New York, this patron bought a salad, and as she was eating it, she started to chew on something that seemed out of place, and she brought it out to take a look at it, and it was the human finger that should have been attached to the person who was making that salad, but it became a part of the salad. And according to, and of course, you can bet that there's a lawsuit involved, right? But according to the story, that the manager of the restaurant who was making this salad accidentally severed a finger, and they were actually at the hospital when this salad made it all the way through to the patron, because the manager was chopping arugula and got a index finger a little too close to the blade, and they lost it somewhere in the salad.
Well, so I have two reactions to that. Number one is you said it was going to make me wince, not gag.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing is, I knew there was a good reason to never include arugula in your salad. I just knew that. I just knew that. So, oh my gosh. Oh, that's really, well, I don't know. This one may make you wince too.
Okay.
For a different reason. So there was this guy in Florida. He's already collected 2,467 copies of the 1997 movie, James Cameron movie, Titanic, on VHS. He has all these
copies
of Titanic on VHS. Right?
Okay.
But he's aiming for 1 million. He wants 1 million copies. And so the guy, if you want to check him out on YouTube, he's identified as Titanic Fan 97. Who knew? That only makes sense. He says, you can't escape this movie. That's true. You can't escape this movie, although I've been trying really hard since 1997. Everyone had it. Your grandma had it. Your mom, your dad, whoever, someone in your family had this movie. So he's aiming to gather 1 million copies. He says, I go to sleep thinking about Titanic, and I wake up thinking about Titanic. Now, Lamar, you had an interesting thought about that.
Well,
when we were talking about this here.
My training and experience might suggest that there might be some medication that might be available to help with this bit of obsessiveness, or at least some support services. But what do you do with 1 million copies? And secondly, how much do you pay for a copy? And what does that number look like?
Well, it gets worse, Lamar, because
of course it does.
If I really didn't like the movie Titanic, which I'm sorry, folks,
you're not
I really didn't like the movie Titanic. I thought it was pure schlock, right? But I especially did not like the soundtrack. And this guy says, we also have the world's largest collection of the Titanic soundtrack on CD. And we're going to be in the next edition of Ripley's Believe It or Not. And I'm just thinking, can one overdose on Celine Dion? I'm sure they can. I'm sure
How do you get the world's largest soundtrack?
I don't know. The world's largest, yeah. So if you happen to have a spare copy of Titanic that you would like to mail to this guy, his name is JD, send it to P.O. Box 5355, Largo, Florida, 33779, and tell JD that Lamar and Tom sent you, okay? Oh, my goodness.
Well, between chopped salads and a hacked movie.
Yeah, maybe we could sit around eating chopped salads and watching the movie.
There we go. All right, man, listen, we definitely are at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, we are. All right. Hey, Lamar, have a great holiday. And
you too, man.
We'll probably be talking between now and January 4th, but in the meantime, have a great holiday, and we'll definitely see you when we sit down with Seth Kaplan.
All right. Well, take care, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to be sure you get notices about new episodes. Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom is a production of Tenacious Change. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar, Roth, and Tom Klaus. And we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today so you can check them out for yourself. Until next time, keep moving toward third space.